Pokémon is the biggest entertainment franchise in the world. It's made more money than Star Wars, Marvel, Mario combined, yet somehow its games often look and run worse than titles made by smaller indie studios. Players have complained for years about frame drops, pop-ins and unfinished textures, but now new leaks might finally explain why. According to reports, the budgets behind Pokémon mainline games are shockingly low, far below what you'd expect for a series that sells tens of millions of copies every generation. And that raises one massive question: why would Nintendo, the Pokémon Company and Game Freak, a trio sitting on billions, choose to spend so little on one of gaming's biggest cash cows? Well, if you enjoyed the video, hit that subscribe button down below for even more Nintendo content here on Power Up Direct. So before we dive into things today, I'm going to go into the recent Pokémon leaks. So if you don't want to be spoiled by any leaks, do click away now. But if you're staying with us, let's get on with the video. Okay, first of all, the leaks that exposed everything. So earlier this year, a massive wave of Pokémon leaks hit the internet. And for once, it wasn't just about new monsters or map details. These leaks, reportedly coming from internal Game Freak documents, revealed something more surprising: the money behind Pokémon's development. According to reports from Eurogamer, Polygon and Engadget, several recent Pokémon titles like Scarlet and Violet, Legends Arceus and the recently released Pokémon Legends ZA, they're all developed on budgets that are shockingly low compared to other major Nintendo Switch releases. Some insiders describe them as mid-tier projects in terms of funding, despite each selling anywhere between 15 and 25 million copies worldwide. So what really caught fans off guard were the budget comparison mentioned in the report. So while a game like Zelda Tears of the Kingdom reportedly had hundreds of developers and a production cycle stretching over 6 years, Pokémon games are made roughly in half that time with smaller teams and a fraction of the budget, and yet both titles sell in the same ballpark. The leaks also included internal planning documents that hinted at Pokémon's future, codenames like Wind and Waves and early mentions of Generation 10 development, but all of that was overshadowed by the financial revelations. Fans expected new mechanics and regions. Instead, they got a look at why Pokémon might still be struggling to meet modern technical standards. So even the development roadmap, as outlined in some leak slides, shows an intense production schedule, a new mainline title every few years, spin-offs and remakes slotted in between, minimal downtime for engine reworks or optimization. It paints a very clear picture. Game Freak is running at full speed on a budget and timeline that would make most AAA developers panic. And that's where the outrage has come from. How could a franchise that earns billions each year from games, merch, anime, films, one that practically prints money, constantly invest so little in its games? The answer isn't simple, but understanding it requires looking beyond the leaks and how Pokémon's business model actually works. Okay, next up, let's have a look at why Pokémon budgets are so low. So how can the most profitable entertainment franchise in history spend less on its games than studios making half as much? The answer, it turns out, comes down to 3 things: structure, schedule, and strategy. First, we've got the structure of the Pokémon brand itself. Unlike most game series, Pokémon isn't owned by a single company. It's split between 3 giants: Game Freak, Nintendo, and you've got the Pokémon Company, each with their own priorities. Game Freak develops the games, Nintendo handles the publishing and hardware, and the Pokémon Company oversees everything else like merchandise, anime, movies, trading cards, and global marketing. In that setup, the games are just one part of a massive ecosystem. They exist to feed the brand, not necessarily to push the limits of technology. Next up, we've got the schedule. So Pokémon releases are tightly linked to merchandise cycles, anime seasons, and global marketing events. Every generation needs new creatures, new toys, new media to sell, all timed absolutely perfectly. That means Game Freak rarely get more than 2 or 3 years to build an entirely new entry. There's no time for a full engine rebuild or a massive open world overhaul when the next movie, toy line, or trading card expansion are already scheduled. Pokémon, in other words, is trapped in its own success. Well, and then we've got the strategy. So from a business standpoint, Pokémon is one of the safest bets in gaming. Each new release sells tens of millions of copies, regardless of reviews, performance issues, or even fan backlash. To investors, it's a guaranteed win. So why pour in more money when a smaller budget still delivers record profits? It's not about making the best games possible, it's about maintaining the machine that keeps Pokémon profitable across every other product it touches. And the result is what many fans call the Pokémon Paradox, a series that dominates sales charts but struggles to evolve, which, come to think of it, is quite ironic. Now, Game Freak isn't chasing perfection, they're chasing consistency, and as long as every generation sells out, that formula is not likely to change. Okay, next up, let's have a look at the recent release of Pokémon Legends ZA. So when Pokémon Legends ZA finally released, many fans hoped it would mark a turning point, a chance for Game Freak to prove that the series could evolve both creatively and also technically. And while critics acknowledged progress, the reviews painted a familiar picture: ambition held back by technical limits. So Eurogamer praised ZA for its bold ideas, calling it a refreshing step forward for the series, the world building, but noted that performance issues and lackluster visuals still dragged down the experience. IGN also echoed that sentiment, saying the game was full of charm and smart design choices, but undeniably rough around the edges. Even Nintendo Life, which is generally more positive towards Nintendo and Pokémon, described it as a promising evolution that is still chained to the past. Across all the reviews, there is one key message that keeps surfacing: Pokémon's creative vision is growing faster than its technical foundation. You can feel Game Freak reaching for something bigger, a more immersive world, more dynamic battles, more personality in every corner of the map, but the tools and the time just aren't there to make it shine. And that brings us right back to the leaks. If the reported budgets are true, these technical shortcomings make perfect sense. Now, it's not that Game Freak doesn't care about quality, it's that they're trying to build open world experiences on budgets that would barely fund a mid-tier project at other studios. Imagine expecting Tears of the Kingdom level polish from a game made with a fraction of the resources and half the time. It's an impossible standard, but it's one that the franchise itself created through its own success. So while Pokémon Legends ZA shows that Pokémon can still innovate, also confirms what fans have suspected for years: the series' biggest limitation isn't imagination, it's investment. Okay, so what does all this mean for Pokemon's future? So the reaction to the leaks and Pokemon Legends ZA this week has been pretty intense. Fans aren't just disappointed anymore, they're confused. How can a franchise make billions each year from games and cards and anime and merchandise and it continue to underperform technically? More importantly, how long can that disconnect last before it starts to hurt the brand? On social media, players have been sharing comparisons between ZA and games like Pal World, Monster Hunter Rise, or even indie creature collectors, all of which look and run better despite having smaller teams and fewer resources. The message is very clear: Pokemon can't rely on nostalgia forever. If competitors start offering richer, smoother, or more visually impressive experiences, fans might begin to drift. And that is something the Pokémon Company never really had to worry about before. The problem isn't just technical though, it's cultural. Pokémon has built its empire on routine, a dependable cycle of releases, tie-ins, and merchandise. Breaking that cycle to invest in bigger teams, or new engines, or longer development timelines would mean disrupting the entire Pokémon machine. And from a corporate perspective, there's little incentive to take that risk when every game, no matter how rough, still sells tens of millions. I mean, just look at Scarlet and Violet that came out on the Switch. It was an absolute dog's dinner, but it still sold tens of millions of copies. There's also a growing sense that something has to change. The leaks have made players more aware than ever about how the franchise operates behind the scenes. Transparency has created pressure, and that pressure could eventually force the Pokémon Company to rethink its approach. If fans stop seeing Pokémon as a guaranteed buy and start viewing it as a franchise that is underperforming its potential, then the conversation shifts from why fix what isn't broken to why keep breaking what could be great. So for now, Pokémon remains too big to fail, but it's also too successful to evolve. The future of the series may depend on whether Game Freak or the people funding them are finally willing to spend like the global powerhouse that they are. Okay, let's finish on the paradox of Pokémon. So in the end, Pokémon represents one of gaming's strangest paradoxes. The biggest franchise in the world, a brand so powerful it could redefine the industry if it wanted to, yet it operates like a company afraid to take risks. The leaks have revealed what many fans long suspected: the limits of Pokémon aren't creative, they are financial. Game Freak and the Pokémon Company have built a machine that prints money, but not necessarily progress. And that is the tragedy. Beneath every frame drop, every glitch, every underwhelming texture, there is still an incredible idea waiting to be fully realised. The question now is whether people running Pokémon will ever invest enough to let that potential shine, or is the world's biggest game going to remain stuck in 8-bit thinking forever? Well, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think about Pokémon Legends ZA. Would love to hear what you think. That one released this week. Also, let me know what you think about the Pokémon budget and also the leaks if you decided to pay attention to them. Well, that is it for this video, and thank you so much for watching or for listening. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for even more Nintendo content here on Power Up Direct. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon.